Дорогие друзья, здравствуйте.
Friends, good morning. Good afternoon, sorry. Today we are discussing a very important subject, the issues of development of new cities and those risks which they have in their development, problems and the ways to solve them. Our speakers will be, I'm going to enumerate them all.
Apologize, I'll speak closer to the mic. Let me list all our speakers. And if you don't have a digital version of our program, the first speaker would be Dmitry Voloshin, head of Khimki district. Second speaker, Martin Vermeuler, our big friend from the Netherlands. He's a managing director for Europe, who reads lectures to our students and who touches them with all the problems which are there in terms of real estate. Our third speaker, Mr. Kalantai, our favorite expert from the General Planning Committee. Our fourth speaker, Andy Snow, technical director of B+B line. Andy Snow, please. And finally, we have Velena Ishmetova, Director for Consulting from Key Capital, Chair of the Expert Council at the Russian Guild of Managers, and Andrew Lukashev, Managing Partner from Ireland, Russia, and CIS. If we have more time, we'll be glad to take any questions from you. After any presentation, you're welcome to ask questions. We will have 4 to 5 minutes after each presentation, and after that we'll switch to next speaker. Thank you. So, Dmitry, you're most welcome. He will speak about urbanization of the municipal entities within the calculating norms of city building schemes. Khimki district case. Good afternoon, dear friends. With your permission, I will speak loud and without mic because I have a presentation and I have to read it out. Can you hear me? Translation won't be possible, probably. Okay, then I will sit. Okay, give me a mic, please, then. Good afternoon, dear friends. Esteemed moderator, first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Mauer and Ms. Velenkina for the opportunity to be present here and to represent Khimki district and to make a presentation here at the Gaidar Forum. For us, this is a big achievement and big privilege. Thank you so much. And he actually started there. This is why he says all these pleasant words. Yes, really, I studied here, and I got several degrees here. And I invite everyone who didn't yet study there at RANEPA to get enrolled immediately. And I worked here for many years. Dear friends and dear colleagues, why Khimki, why this district is making presentation here? This municipality was urbanized prior to we were appointed managers of this territory, and it was urbanized in a very difficult way. And actually, the entity is called Khimki Municipal Entity or District, and it includes a number of other districts, such as Fersanovka, Podreskova, and a pool of regions brought together into one city district. Urbanization, this is a process of increasing the role, strengthening the role of cities, of city culture, city relations, used in order to develop relations between people. So the cities now expand, the density of the population increases, we develop high-tech jobs and offer new jobs to people. Khimki, as a district, acquired the status of an urbanized entity after a special law was passed. When villages and small towns located on the territory of Khimki district were brought together around the core or nucleus of Khimki district. So we now have old Khimki and new Khimki. The process of urbanization was facilitated by the reform of the municipalities, which was launched in 2014. In the framework of the Moscow region, a lot has been done. Until 2014, the territory of the Moscow region included 35 city districts and 36 municipal areas. At the moment, we have 51 city districts and only 16 municipal districts or areas. On that slide, you can see the history of urbanization, and I will comment on what you may see on the slide. In 1926, Khimki was set up as a small village with a population of no more than 2,000 people. When industrialization process started, Khimki saw a number of enterprises opened up. The first industry, the first plant was Ulyanovsk Metal Works, followed by Brickstone plant, then clothes and clothing materials factory. In 1940, this territory acquired the status of Khimki district and included 60 villages and towns with the population of about 16,000 people. Then, actually, in 20 years, the population of the territory was already more than 100,000 people. In 2005, the population increased to 244,000 people. According to the master plan and land use strategy until 2020, the planned population of that district is more than 300,000 people. And actually, by 2030, the population will increase to the figure of about 300,000. According to the approved territory of city zoning, Khimki district is located in the vicinity of Krasnogorsk and Dolgoprudny area. We certainly promote sustainable development. The territory of Khimki is about 10,980 hectares, where 0.25% of the total square of the region, but at the same time, the density of the population is quite high. We see a rapid growth in the population of the district due to the fact that Khimki is located next to Moscow, next to the ring road, is next to federal highways M9 and M10, and certainly Sheremetyevo Airport is also located at Khimki district. The population is not spread evenly on the territory, the density of the population, and I would like to stress these figures because this is very important data. So the density of the population ranges from 3.5 people per 1 square hectares to more than 130 people. And compare that to Moscow. In Moscow, the density of the population ranges from 40 to 300 people 1 square hectare. At the same time, the municipality maintains the surplus of jobs for the local population. According to the traditional norms, we have to provide jobs for at least 50% of the population. So we employ locally about 128,000 jobs. So bearing in mind that the total population is more than 200,000 people, our surplus is 8,000 jobs. A master plan for the land use and development of the territory was adopted in 2017. For the first time, we did an enormous work in order to update the current structures of land use. We identified the territories which are not recorded in the cadastre and which later on were involved into the land use. We plant greenery and develop the territory the way we can. Here you may see a more detailed picture about what territories we have at our district. The land is being distributed by the municipality. We now manage 3,500 hectares, and you can see the figures typical of our balance sheet. Until December 2017, the territory of the city district had no master plan and the rules of land use and development. Usually we had, prior to that date, adopt certain laws and bylaws, and certain local regulations were adopted until 2013. Later on, they were updated in 2014 and 2017. The analysis of the city building situation in terms of available population and the population plan until 2035 showed that we have to move in a totally different direction, meaning that we have to focus more on building schools, kindergartens, clinics and hospitals. When preparing for the draft master plan, we revealed disproportion in terms of how we develop the territory. Master plan for us, first of all, is about setting order or bring everything in order. When we use totally different tools in order to do city planning. But in essence, this is the main regulation, the main law, which guides us in our activity. On that slide, you can see the current shortage in terms of the social infrastructure. But the master plan identified kind of a reserve or standby land, which was estimated at 54,000 hectares. So we may see certain specific land plots which actually could be allocated for addressing our current needs. So master plan was a totally important thing for us to do in order to identify where we can move and what room for maneuver we have. We have identified 63 different territories for the comprehensive development with the total square of about 920 hectares. 335 hectares actually will be designed for residential housing, and 585 hectares would be allocated for non-residential territory. These land plots would be allocated bearing in mind the current needs of the country. We actually are not going to build anything industrial on that territory. So housing and non-housing facilities are going to be built there. So if it is not included into the comprehensive plan of development, then nothing would be built there. So you cannot just sporadically or spontaneously build a new building there. We use the master plan and comprehensive land use strategy in order to analyze how many jobs we have to create. Land use rules and master plan also envisages setting up 78,000 new jobs, and 58,000 jobs would be opened at 2 new technological parks or industrial parks. That would be Schodnia Technological Park, Airport Sheremetyevo, multifunctional territory called Khimki, and logistics hub Levoberezhne. Non-residential territory will create 20,000 new jobs in such industries as tourism, commerce industry, and leisure. Bearing in mind the facts which I have listed, dear colleagues, urbanization requires a very rigid city building regulation in order to avoid extra costs for levying up the balance of residential, non-residential houses and buildings. We have to synchronize the housing construction with the construction of infrastructural facilities. And there are two sources to eliminate the shortage of deficit. First of all, we can use the territories for renovations and development. And we can take advantage of the population. Bear in mind the number of the population, that it increases not because of some artificial factors, but also due to some natural causes. Actually, we can boast new jobs and other good factors too. Apart from the master plan and the city land use, municipality has other tools for city planning, regulation or control. First of all, we have some regulatory tools such as master plan and land use and development, municipal programs, the programs for comprehensive development of transportation and other types of infrastructure, and also we take a comprehensive approach to the development of infrastructure. We are taking advantage of the fact that our territory is unique as it is located next to Moscow. We improve the living standards of people. As for the budget is concerned, first of all, we impose taxes and we benefit from the VAT taxes, the renovation of non-residential territories. At the moment, Khimki City District has the master plan, the rules of land use and development, and municipal programs. So this is the main pool of regulatory documents which is available there. We did a lot in order to speed up the investment activity, including using the budgetary means. To be specific, 3,816 entrepreneurs were registered on the territory of Khimki in 2017, so we have a huge investment potential. We have good climate, and certainly everyone is very much welcome to help us develop together. As for our plans, we're going to update new local bylaws and laws. Also, we plan to jointly work with the government of the Moscow region and government of Moscow to develop comprehensive systems of social infrastructure and transport infrastructure. And also, special attention would be paid to traffic. As far as we are bordering Moscow, we have to reconcile all our master plans and traffic schemes with them, with Moscow. 1 minute left only. Okay? Also, some work would be done together with the investments on sustainable development of the territory. We are going to do some landmarking on the territory which has already been allocated. Thank you so much. Just exactly 1 minute. Do you have any questions to Dmitry? Yes, please. Young man? You'll be number 2. Thank you so much, Dmitry, for a bright presentation. I'm Dmitry Kalinin from Moscow. First of all, just to specify, actually, are you appointed or you elected? I'm an elected person. Okay, my second question. The powers or authorities which you have, it actually doesn't coincide with the same position in Moscow. It coincides. Well, this is a municipal entity. All the heads of the municipal entities have the same power in Russia. And Moscow and St. Petersburg and Sevastopol are the cities of federal significance, so they act as the considered members of the Russian Federation. So we are smaller than Moscow. But all in all, we aim at improving the living standards for the population. Whatever the officials do should be aimed at addressing this problem, at attaining this target. Khimki district actually got the status of a city district in 2006, and within those 11 years, no one could adopt the master plan. Why this case is unique? Because it is not profitable to adopt these master plans and regulations, because many officials and businessmen benefit from living in such a chaos, but we did it, being guided by the urbanization process. You may solve the problems typical of urbanized territories only using some specific tools, and these specific tools are enshrined in our regulations and bylaws. Our main objective is to do everything to improve the quality of living for our population. So this is my objective and the objective put forward for me by the governor of Moscow region, Mr. Vorobyov. We actually bring the standards into life. Yes, you'll be number 3. Thank you so much. Yes. Is it on? Yep. My name is Novolikov Alexander. Just as a person from the same city, let me tell you that we don't have any problems, but I will not tell you about my problems. But when I'm commuting, when I take the suburban train, actually next to mega supermarkets, I see a crossing, and actually it is not regulated, just people have to cross the street with very heavy traffic, with no street lights. Well, actually there is signage which prohibits anything like that, and very soon underground passing will be organized, but still people just try to cross the street there, which is banned. Thank you. One more question. Not now. The question is off the mic. Translation not possible. So the future of Torzhok commercial store or mall. Actually, the assets of this mall is pledged to one of the banks, and with everything possible that this territory functions, resumes its functioning. Certain investors approached us in order to launch a market, but there will be no market because actually Leningradsky Avenue would be full of traffic jams. We have to arrange for some acceleration lane, which is not possible there. So we do everything possible not to improve the living standards, not to deteriorate the quality of living. Actually, if we do what you say, actually, the local people will stuck in traffic jams for 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes. My name is Sergei Nikolaev. Tell me, please, Dmitry, judging by your presentation, the city, according to your vision, is about land use? Is it about square meters and growth in your population? But do you have more humane description of the city? Probably this is about some social practices or people. Let me remind you that the section which we are holding now is dedicated to urbanization. And urbanization is about infrastructure and square meters. This is what urbanization is about. And this is also about people, the population, which can be portrayed in terms of figures. I have certain notion of how many roads we have, how many kindergartens and hospitals we have, how social infrastructure works, how many privileges we have. But the topic of this session is totally different. That's why I prepared the presentation for those stakeholders who are interested in that. If you want to get a presentation dedicated to my district, actually, I would be ready to give you any presentation on anything. More than 100 versions, starting from social infrastructure. Actually, Khimki can boast 24 industries, and we have more than one presentation dedicated to each of the industries. A Q&A session is over. Martin? Yes, please. Your presentation dedicated to smart and sustainable urbanization with a focus on the development of housing building and area development.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Great. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the organization for inviting me for the third time to this very prestigious and important forum. So thank you very much for that. I always am very happy to be here and to contribute with a speech about a topic that is close to my heart. Today I will talk about smart and sustainable urbanization with a specific focus on social housing or on housing and redevelopment. A topic that is broadly discussed basically everywhere across the world, but it's all about implementation and is it really going to happen in the end? The topics that I would like to touch upon today are the pros and cons of what we would like to see in cities. I will discuss smart cities, smart homes and smart redevelopment. What does it really entail? The challenges, and of course I will discuss the challenges in more detail because we have to overcome them in order to make sure that we can really start building smart cities. And of course, at the end, there's room for questions and answers. Some 3-4 years ago, RSCS did a research report based on research globally, and part of it was also focusing on cities. And this report showed what people don't want in the future going forward and what they do want. And of course, if you look at the things that people don't want, it's about high density, too many people in not enough space. They don't want a lot of traffic. They want to have, of course, a secure and safe city. And of course, it needs to be livable. So also, if you look at the managerial side of the city, it shouldn't be highly bureaucratic. And people should be involved in decision making. So what people want is livable space, green, not too much traffic, safe places to live, but also involvement in basic decision making about how the city should look like going forward. And I always like to visualize things, and therefore I made this little diagram. On the left-hand side is how we do city development today. And on the right-hand side, you can see how it is going to look like going forward. And there's a very clear difference. And in the middle, it's all about value creation together, all the stakeholders involved. It's about governance, and I will touch upon this later on a little bit more in detail. It's about environmental awareness. We need to think about sustainable cities as well. And lastly, it's about social involvement. Again, it's not just government or the municipality that decides about how the city should look like. No, all the stakeholders need to be engaged. And you can see some of them in a circle around the middle. And the challenge, of course, is when you build a new city, it's not that difficult. But if you have to redevelop an existing city, and therefore it's all about new stock, but also about existing demand, transformation. When I thought about what I'm going to share with you today, I also thought, yeah, we're talking about smart urbanization. But what is smart? And then I started to write down what could potentially be smart at 3 levels: at city level, at housing level, and at redevelopment level. And if you talk about smart cities, you can talk about smart mobility. And I will not read out the full list, but it's also about smart safety or smart health, education, tourism and leisure. All those things can be made smart. But then again, what is smart? And later on, I will talk about this a little bit more in detail. If you talk about smart homes, homes are operated by electronic devices. It's about security, intelligent feedback. How do I deal with my house? Am I aware of the cost of gas and electricity? It's about landscaping control, etc. And lastly, if you speak about smart redevelopment, so to speak, it's about, well, is it close to existing infrastructure hubs? It's about walkable, sometimes very hard for me to read my own sheets, apologies. It's about projects for open space. And again, the design of the infrastructure in a city and how it's being developed. But again, if you want to realize a smart city or you want to do smart urbanization, it's very important to pay enough attention to the challenges. And I think part of the fact that it's still not there yet is because we haven't solved the challenges yet. And for me, there's four. First of all, alignment of interest. Everybody in the city needs to be aligned. And that's something I call urban governance. We need to organize that. The second thing is that we need to execute. It's all fine and good to have a vision about the city, how it should look like. We know a strategy. You can easily make a strategy, but then it's about execution. How do you make it really work? And then adaptability. It's again fine and good to make cities smart, but do we want all that as a human, for example? And lastly, it's all about financing. Who is going to pay for things? If you talk about urban governance, it's very important, and I referred to it already in one of my previous slides. You have to engage with all the people that are involved in the city. So it's again not just about the government or the municipality anymore. It's also about the citizen that lives in the city. It's about the banks, it's about the developers. All the people, all the parties that are involved in basically reshaping the city need to be engaged with. They need to start taking joint decisions. That's the most important point. And that's also the hardest point to achieve, simply because it's very tough to get everybody aligned. But then again, if you don't take this approach, later on in the process you will see that you're going to fail. So there's no way back, basically. In detail, how does that look like, urban governance? It's about being democratic and inclusive. It's about having a long-term and integrated perspective. It's about a multi-scale and multi-level approach. It's about being territorial and proficient and also digitally conscious. And again, there's a lot more to the slide, but those are the main points to make. And of course, I was talking about having a vision and a strategy. You have to make a plan. And bearing in mind, when you talk about urbanization, it's very important to realize that you have to face your projects. So you have your initial stage, your intentional stage, your integrational stage, and lastly, your transformational stage. And it's very important to split your project in pieces, simply because you have to start overseeing it, and you can't do it from A to Z at the beginning. And like I said, the most important point, or the hardest part in this case, is not the strategy or the vision, it's about execution. And this is a very simple example of the development process. You've got the initiative phase, the development phase, the realization phase, and the management phase. But the point is that in all those phases, you need to include all your stakeholders. There needs to be an ongoing dialogue. And again, that's the toughest part of the process. And of course, the quality and work of output needs to be agile. It needs to be innovative, and it needs to be sustainable. I also said, if you talk about smart cities or smart urbanization, we have to think about, do we want this as a human? Do we want all that technology? Do we like it? But also, is it healthy for us, all that radiation? Do we want this? So there's three things that you have to take into account. Human behavior. Is it meaningful to you as a citizen? And is it inviting enough for you? About the data, are they durable and are they always there? And lastly, the technology needs to be easy to use and also scalable. It doesn't help if only 10 people can use it. No, a whole city needs to be able to use it. And lastly, of course, it's about financing. Can we really add value and therefore generate profit? How are we going to deal with the equity, the debt, the profit, investment decision making, all the things you have to take into account, and they are all coming back to what I just said before, the involvement of all the stakeholders in the process. So, in conclusion, if you talk about smart urbanization, I think we've passed the point of no return. It is going to happen, but still a lot of barriers need to be overcome. We are exploring new territory. We don't know what's to come yet. But then again, let's get ready and be prepared for the future. And the future is ours to create. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. Дорогие
Friends, I would like to remind you that Martin is the director of RIX, and RIX is the biggest certified organization of real estate market specialists, which has its own table at UN sessions. So please ask questions to him. He knows a lot. Are there any questions? Yes, please. Martin, my question is very specific. There are 3 types of building up. An elite building to be built in a yard of a previously existing building, a kindergarten or a garage. What will be the group support for the decision making by the population? By what methods? What methods can you suggest? It's a specific issue, a very important issue for Moscow.
Exactly. That is what what I tried to say, that you need to engage and involve all the people that are stakeholder in a specific area. Meaning, and there's no one plan that fits all. So it will be different in the US, from Europe, from Russia, because you also to take into account planning and regulation, of course. But the point is, you need to start to discuss with each other what is needed in a specific area. Sometimes that will be a building, sometimes it will be social housing, sometimes it will be a kindergarten, but you have to agree with each other what is needed in a specific area and how it's going to look like. And then you can start realizing.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that I have a lot of experience in setting up systems for assessment of the solution options or decision options. I worked for the previous presidential president, and we have our own philosophy of decision making based on the golden section and other things, and perhaps you would look at that and say that this can be used in Europe. I once spoke in Amsterdam, and that had a very good reception. Well, please come to Martin at the end of our expert discussion, give your business card to him, and you can cooperate. You understand that I'm not speaking in my personal capacity. Our faculty and your faculty also have used this technology. Yes, please.
Пожалуйста.
The last question, please. Well, I will ask my question in English.
So it actually relates to the previous question, but in a more maybe radical direction. I'm a historian of cities, and I noticed your use of the word, but in quotations, of the right to the city, which is of course a concept from Henri Lefebvre, has been used by many social protest movements, precisely against urban planners, who you acknowledge the need to include citizen involvement, but critics would say that when you look at civic movements, informal civic movements of protests, slum dwellers, squatters movements and the like, that what you're doing is co-opting a much more radical idea, and I'm curious how you respond to that. The idea of the right to the city being used by urban planners.
I don't get your question.
So the right to the city originally is a French idea that's meant to challenge the power structures of how cities are governed. And what you're suggesting is that those who govern cities should embrace that concept. And there's actually an argument among at least people who do urban studies that that's actually an attempt to silence citizens as opposed to empower them. You disagree, I assume, but I'm interested in, because it's such a controversial term.
No,
right to the city.
I don't because I have seen some bad examples of this as well. That people were said to be included, but they were actually not, like you said, to be silenced. But still, I honestly believe that urban governance has the future, for the reasons I just referred to. If your citizens are not happy to live in the city that is being built, why are you going to do it? Another thing is that also for the financing of the city, more and more people need to be involved, because it's not a given necessarily that the government is going to pay for infrastructure or for the green, for the landscaping in a city. So more and more you will see concepts where also citizens pay for landscaping or are going to be responsible for the maintenance of the landscaping. So you need each other in order to get it right. So I believe in it, but I've seen bad examples as well. So I agree with you on that one. Thank you.
Спасибо. Последний.
Thank you. The last question, please. A student of the Industry Management Institute. My question is, how is the idea of smart cities or smart buildings is applicable to Russia, and how can they, where can they be built? For example, in Moscow, where we have a lot of historical buildings, and as our resources are being used up, we will need them more. And how will the cityscape change? And do you think that it will change for the worse, at least for those people who love history and who respect it?
That we have to build new. So you can also make historical buildings smart because you use sensor technology. So you, like I said, in an existing environment, you can implement sensors, for example, at the lights on the street lights or in buildings, and therefore making those buildings smart. So it's not necessarily about building new buildings. No, you can also integrate it in existing buildings and also historical buildings. So there's no worry that they will decease or that they will go away.
Спасибо. Я бы хотела напомнить, что
I would like to remind you that that Vienna has been recognized as a smart city despite huge numbers of historical buildings which are which are in harmony with the landscape there. Unfortunately, we cannot ask any more questions because of time. And now, our next speaker, Alexander Nikolaevich Kolontai, Deputy Director of the General Planning Research Institute, and his report is Anthropometry of an Ideal City in the Post-Industrial Era. I even looked up the definition of anthropometry on the internet today. Good evening, colleagues. It's very good. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak here. Well, I had a lot of options for the name of my presentation, and I stopped on this. Of course, I am speaking mostly for a Russian audience. I'm the third here, and before me, everybody spoke about an ideal city. There was an attempt to build Khimki as an ideal city. After that, we listened to the British concept of an ideal city, a comprehensive model. And we are afraid of speaking about ideal cities, although there are lots of concepts which are called smart, sustainable, digitalized cities. But all these are different aspects of an ideal city. But when we look at the problem broadly, we run the risk of losing the city, losing the human being. So I decided to focus on one small problem. Anthropometry means the attitude of a human being to the city. How a person perceives a city. Will this city, to a city, any city smart or sustainable or whatever, and the post-industrial era is, I hope, the era which we have entered. Today's conference and yesterday was mostly dealing with governance, with the importance of human capital, and a lot has been said about digitalization. This is a bureaucratic concept which, in different hands, may either harm or bring something good to people? Are we still living in a technocratic concept of a city? And let us try and see how we can transit to a new concept. Yesterday, I looked at the concept prepared by the Ministry of Construction of the Russian Federation. This document is called the Strategy of Development of Housing in the Russian Federation, and it says that that a comfortable environment is necessary and that it is connected with fostering talent, and that the quality of the environment in cities is very important. And so it is not just digitalization or creating competitive human capital resources. So there are 3 steps to achieve a comfortable environment. This is the environment of comfortable parameters, my own environment and everyone's environment, and the environment of the freedom of choice. So let us try to understand what is a comfortable environment. What does it consist of? Not just the number of square meters. So let's look at point 1. Point 1, comfortable parameters. Let's remember the Renaissance projects of ideal cities, which were closely connected with human parameters, and the measures were all those measures that were used, for example, foot or inch or other traditional measures, were all based on the human body. On the left, you see the Renaissance model law, and on the right there was a Russian variant with traditional Russian units of measurement. I show you 2 Renaissance ideal cities, those that were that were actually built, and where they tried to make a city comfortable, which was very convenient for pedestrians, which is now very fashionable. The first city is Palma Nova, is very small. You can go from the center to the city limit in 530 steps. That is 5 minutes on foot. It is very important. It has been included in all our books. But the second city was never built, the city of Sfortsinda. It is a little bit bigger, and you need about 30 minutes to reach from the center to the limit. This is another unit of measurement on which the concept of comfortable city environment is built. In fact, one of the UN projects is something in between 5 minutes and 30 minutes. And Sfortsinda was as big as Moscow within the Garden Ring, just for you to have an idea. And we continued to live in a city of the 1920s. The ideal city invented by Le Corbusier as a machine city, where it was not the human body, but the car was the basic unit, and the quality of facades was not important. Another big concept is the garden city, which was put forward by a British expert, and the cross of these 2 ideas can be found in all our cities, all the housing estates, and we cannot go out. For example, Tolyatti is a completely new city built under Soviet power, according to the Le Corbusier's model, and all our new districts, city districts, and Moscow, St. Petersburg, which have this floating planning among green spaces, is this implementation of the ideal city project. And in St. Petersburg, you see that we do not keep on implementing Le Corbusier's ideas, but we also have renounced the idea of garden city. The cars have occupied all the free space, and there are no green spaces there. So we have this is a setback. So what can be done in order to achieve a comfortable urban environment? History knows a number of historical innovations in Vienna, in Barcelona, in Paris in the middle of the 19th century. These cities were reconstructed on the basis of those Renaissance ideas. And I would like to focus on Barcelona because in the course of reconstruction of Barcelona, a whole theory of a comfortable environment was developed. The blue circle shows the most important, the central part of the pedestrian part of the city, which is as big as Fortzinda, just exactly the same size. And in Vienna, in Paris, this is the most active zone. That means that the specialists who created those cities in the 15th and 16th centuries perfectly understood the ability of the human body, which has not changed since in any way. So we should work according to this model too. So what did Alphonse Cerda, who developed the replanning of Barcelona? He said that an element of city planning must not be bigger than 100 to 115 meters, and it should form the public space outside and inside, and it must have a network of a diverse network of streets and connections. And besides these basic elements, groups of city blocks, which we call in Russian microrayon, a micro district, and that the biggest urban area should not be bigger than 500 city blocks, and it is also as big as Fortzinda. So for Alice von de Cerda regarded Palmanova as the smallest ideal model and Sforzinda as the biggest ideal model. And what happens afterwards? Recently we have seen an explosion of return to the human dimensions. So all the new models include the so-called pedestrianization and boulevardization and other things which are meant to ensure comfort. Helsinki called the concept of its new general plan boulevardization. So the biggest streets in the city were turned into green streets, which are comfortable both for drivers and for pedestrians. And on the right, we see the strategy of development of New York, where the human being with all his needs is present, and the city should be designed based on these needs. And Moscow is not lagging behind. We have heard a lot about renovation, and anthropometry of building up Moscow has required understanding and reflection on this. And the contender of the project for future Moscow planning, we have proposals for the minimal unit of urban planning, 75 meters by 250 meters, and providing green spaces and things like that. But Moscow is a bit different because from those European cities which were renovated in the middle of the 19th century, they had mostly buildings, 6 or 7 story buildings, and in Moscow we now want to build 14 story buildings. What it will end, I don't know. I don't know. But let's look at the examples of recent, most successful recent urban construction where human anthropometry was reflected in the best way possible. So where we see a balance between a smart city and a human dimension city, which is good for tactile and other tactile and more abilities of human beings and other abilities. Vienna, I would like to show you the Aspirin district of Vienna, which is a new mini city, and once again it is as big as Palmanova. A fragment of this Aspirin district shows the diversity inside this in the cities of the streets, which are 12 to 14 meters wide. So they are as comfortable as possible for crossing. And we see on the photos, we see in the streets in which go through inside the quarters. And you don't see any car here because here they are meant for pedestrians. In Jätkäsaari in Helsinki, we have the same number of stories, 3 to 7 stories within a building. We have the same typology of streets and squares. We have green yards without cars, the same organization of space, and the size of blocks, which is the same as in the ideal cities of Renaissance, which we have discussed. New districts in Europe are old districts which were invented in human history, but are full of modern technology, which allows people to be more comfortable. And here you see a comparison between those new European districts, and on the left we see European districts, and on the right Moscow. We see that in there the breadth of a pedestrian street is 13 meters, while in Moscow it is 46 to 50 meters, because we have far taller buildings up to 40 meters, and so we need to have bigger wider streets. And of course there is a danger of monotony, and we need to do something, either to have fewer cars or to have fewer stories in buildings. You see how this is being done in Moscow. On the left, it is not just a replacement of one housing with another type of housing. We need to reconstruct also the transportation structure, the employment distribution, etc. And on the right, you see the example of Berlin, more modest. 5-story blocks of flats were replaced by new comfortable buildings with more comfortable environment, which also resembles the Renaissance model. On this slide, you see on the right Helsinki, Jätkäsaari, and on the left you see one of the projects suggested for reconstruction of the Kuzminki district in Moscow, in which our colleague, our speaker colleague, has taken part, his company, in fact. Each project is made based on the project objective, and in Jätkäsaari they wanted to. The objective was to build a most comfortable urban environment, and in Moscow it is just a design of a new housing district, and well, in fact, the Moscow solution is very close to the Finnish one. Alexander Nikolaevich, it is very interesting, but how much time do you need? Well, we are finishing. And the two last slides, the first deals with the problem of private spaces, without which the environment management is impossible. We still have it. We still have the problem with it. The Finnish option was, well, when we form the urban environment with buildings where the ground floor is public, and then there can be small streets which are private ones. And in the German case, we see that the housing construction is made at the outskirts of the city, and in the ground floors there are private microspaces which distance the front of building between public and private space, making housing more comfortable. We are not using this yet, and the freedom of choice regarding which includes the accessibility of rent, accessibility of labor, etc., etc. Well, in Helsinki, you see that this is 45%, in Vienna 45%, Amsterdam 80%, and in Moscow only 16%, and Russia 7%. But in Stockholm, the idea, the head of the city council said that housing is not a means for private enrichment. And the final conclusions of the presentation are here. And the last one says that we should remember the Swedish advice, the Swedish Council Chairman advice, without which there can be no comfortable environment, of which we have been speaking so much. Thank you. Now, yes, good afternoon. I'm Tatiana. I teach at the Friendship of People's University in Moscow. I would like to ask the speaker. Well, we have very interesting ideas concerning a comfortable urban environment, and especially low-story building and civilized parkings. How realistic can it be in Moscow? I have asked this question, and an expert told me, well, what do you want? In Spain, they also have problems with cars. There are no parkings. What can we do? Put them under the ground or on upper floors? I have another question. I want to ask it at once. And the second question regards comfort. In Moscow, do you walk in Moscow? Yes, of course. Do you like those streets, dirty shops? How do these projects take into account the means of street cleaning? When I walk along dirty streets, or when I enter a trolleybus in which I see a puddle of slush, I see that I don't want it. Well, you know, street cleaning and shaping a city are two different things, or snow cleaning.
Here we speak about some solid surface. There are a lot of means of fighting with snow. Let me address the first question, probably. This is exactly a very topical issue. I have developed this question a lot with my experts in every detail. And they could implement what I showed to you and replicate some European experience, and probably it could be feasible, but in what conditions? We were guided by some Spanish quarters, A101, a new district in Moscow. This is one of the examples of European approach to municipal development. An integrated approach with underground parking lots, high-rises and low-rises, and everything is already bought out, sold out. Hence the question, can we continue this concept further on in Moscow? And can we address the problem of parking the way this approach solves? To my surprise, the experts did some calculations and said that mid-rise buildings are quite viable. The IRR is 20% and the payback period is 5 years. even if we actually reduce the parameters which were used for the Spanish quarters of A101. The policy regarding rental of housing is a little bit different because this is a problem of a lifestyle, and there is a problem of jobs. Unfortunately, we have some specific tradition and attitude towards employment and housing, and we have to take some comprehensive measures. As for rises are concerned, do we need high rises or low rises? My presentation shows that mid rises, the number of floors ranging from 6 to 8 allows us to allow for quite good density, with a density ranging from 2.5 to 3 in one block, and this is the measurement which we have to use in order to do calculations, because actually usually these parameters, these figures are used for the whole district, and the investors would then do whatever they want with these figures. And the governance, good governance also, would provide for the efficiency of such an approach. Unfortunately, we miss a representative of the Ministry of Construction. But our approach shows that if you develop some living area and there are more than 200 flats there, then probably this situation cannot be governed efficiently. The quarters which we're building are convenient in terms of construction, convenient in terms of actually selling them out, but they cannot be managed properly. And if there are high rises, lots of apartments within one block, it cannot be managed. This is a very comprehensive issue, and mid-rises, this is not about human factor, this is not about some tactile feeling, but this is about management or governance. I still didn't get any answer to my question. Actually, I asked what we should do. You have to design what I have shown on my slide. Look, you have to adopt a policy. Why I say that we are missing the ministry there? Because this is the ministry which should impose certain limitations as to the density, as to the height of the buildings, and should define how you manage. Today it is very profitable to build as much as possible because actually the managing companies find it easy to manage what cannot be managed efficiently because they can impose whatever tariffs and whatever fees they want. Actually, you have to adopt certain policy. Gentlemen, I invite all of you to a masterclass organized by Alexander to be held in the upcoming 2 months, and you may ask any questions you want. I apologize, I just was number one. I raise my hand. I'd like to answer your question as an urbanist. Alexander was to tell you about some dirt which emerges as a result of construction. Sobyanin, mayor of Moscow, when he started ruling Moscow, he immediately set up a block related to the moratorium or ban on building in the city. So there was a moratorium of commercial buildings construction, and therefore the traffic improved a lot, and he even managed to manage to control the costs of building in the city. Why the master plan there is not finished, in contrast to what is done in Khimki? Why, for instance, there is no ban or moratorium on residential housing construction or commercial housing construction? 2 quarters away from here, we see some illegal construction of high-rise to replace a playground there. And we see a lot of fighting there. So Cossacks and militia, where the police summoned, and there is even a shootout or standoff. So that's a high-rise surrounded by old 5-story buildings. Where is the moratorium? Why Sobyanin doesn't listen to us? Well, I appreciate very much that the conference, a scientific conference, is transformed into a public hearing of how we develop certain districts. I cannot be responsible instead of the Moscow government. We actually execute the orders of the Moscow government. I may have my own opinion, Mr. Seven may have his own opinion. We're speaking about the mid-rises, and actually I'm not responsible for high-rises in that district. In some cases, mid-rises would be appropriate. In some areas, it won't be appropriate. We're speaking about tendencies and trends. We have to reduce the number of floors. We have to reduce the density. We have to control the costs at the level of the construction, selling, and operation. At the same time, we have to take into account all the basic parameters typical of living standards. So this is the main idea of my presentation. This is the message which I wanted to convey. Do you have any questions about that? Yes, please. Good afternoon. My name is Rabinovich Anatoly, advisor to Ms. Khovanskaya and chair of the Housing Committee of the State Duma. And I'm actually used to be deputy of the Moscow Council for many, many years. I have a question to you. You're a professional, but actually a question which arises, who is the customer of what you said? Because unfortunately in Russia, this would be the state which acts as a customer rather than people or residents. And my question is as follows. In December, expert journal held some discussion, a big big congress dedicated to gentrifying onto renovation in Moscow. And head of the Department for City Building Policy was asked a question. President of Russia, end of December, said that there are some initiatives to improve the demographic parameters. Is there any connection between gentrifying and demography in Moscow? And this person said that this has nothing to do with demography, and you have to discuss that at the level of the city, etc., etc. Do you think that this is the right approach? That your institute should be involved in analyzing this question, how the gentrifying and renovation is connected to demography. Speaking about Khimki, we speaking about agglomeration. My family, which is a part of gentrifying process, probably could resettle somewhere to Khimki, and it would be actually cheaper for me, more convenient. I would be sitting on the bank of River Volga, etc., etc. I don't want probably to live in the district where I'm living. Actually, this question was not discussed with Moscow region. Probably we can discuss that along with us, and then our foreign colleagues will advise us how to make it more beautiful. I totally agree with both your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we have abused your attention, but we have one more question. You have one more question, okay? That would be the last one. And now we pass the floor to Andy Snow, Technical Director, IACOM Company. Please.
My name is Andy Snow. I'm a Technical Director at a company called ACOM, and I'll be talking about bringing modern life to industrial areas of the city. So could I have the remote control? There we go. Thanks. I think this is a particularly relevant topic, mainly because we're living in a post-industrial time now, and there's many industrial areas within cities that would value from regeneration and renovation of those parts of the city. Just very briefly to talk about ACOM, I'm sure not many people here are familiar with the company. We're an international consultancy firm that specialises in most sectors within the construction industry. I myself am an architect and a master planner, but ACOM covers specialisms with most sectors within the construction industry, from architects, engineers, the construction management side of things as well. And globally, there's around about 100,000 within ACOM. One thing we try to do within all of our work is focus on safety as well, whether it's safety within the workplace, whether it's safety within design, or whether it's safety within the construction site. This is something that we really believe in within all of our work. I think that the first question to ask is, why do we want to regenerate industrial areas within the city? Obviously, they're derelict, not particularly attractive, so what's the value in regenerating them? The first point to make is that typically an industrial area would have been built on the edge of a city, and as the city has grown, the city has enveloped industrial areas, and industrial areas have formed important aspects of the city where people obviously work. When the industry leaves, these areas just become redundant spaces within the city and begin to disconnect cities. So cities really struggle to operate around the derelict industrial areas. Secondly, many industrial areas actually benefit from having very good infrastructure connections, whether it's a canal network or a road network or a train network. There's often very good infrastructure for these areas. And so when redeveloping them, there's a lot of good infrastructure connections that we can build upon, which is of added value. Thirdly, it's not just the industrial area that actually benefits from regeneration. It's all of the surrounding areas as well, the areas which were disconnected previously. All of these really benefit from the regeneration. So there's a wider positive impact that regeneration of industrial areas can bring a city. And finally, within many industrial areas, there's fantastic opportunities. Talking as an architect, there's often very good quality architecture there that can be regenerated, so there's a very attractive potential for some of these industrial areas. The first project which I want to talk about is the Olympic Games in London. ACOM produced the master plan for this in 2012, and it's a perfectly relevant example of how regeneration of industrial areas can have a very significant benefit on the city. The Olympic Games, it was a site originally 270 hectares of derelict industrial land located between Hackney and Stafford within London. It was an area that would have once been the source of the economy within the area, and since the industry left, simply became a wasteland and something that acted more of a negative rather than as a positive. By the time we actually master planned the games, there was a huge transformation for the area, transforming a derelict industrial land plot into a major sporting event, the heart of which would have been the sporting venues for the Olympic Games, the main arena, the aquatic centre, but there's also a park within that area as well. But the master plan and the work that we did wasn't just focused on the Olympic Games itself. That was a successful event, obviously, but the long-lasting benefit of the Olympic Games was being able to transform this industrial area into a longer-lasting legacy for the city. And we were able to do that by having a master plan that was able to transform over time. So the diagram above you illustrates how the master plan developed from the sporting venue into the final master plan, which effectively stitches the rest of the city back into the industrial area. So bringing communities back into the heart of the master plan. Another example of master plan work that AECOM have done, this is a project in Qatar. It's called the Heart of Doha. This is 35 hectares of downtown Doha, not heavy industry, but it was still significant industrial area that was derelict and decrepit within the city. The approach that AECOM took for this project was really understanding the history and the context. So developing a master plan that adopted a road network that was consistent with the historical network, allowing for the wind blowing off the sea to actually be aligned with the road so that there was a natural cooling within the master plan as well, and then creating a lattice of pedestrian networks also. So really from understanding the history and the context, being able to recreate a derelict part of Doha and to transform it into a very vibrant mixed-use community. These are two very different projects, obviously, but between the both of them, there are some similarities. The first one is that both of these projects make unique urban spaces. They're very original designs and offer something very new to the cities. Both of them have a lot of variety and interest within the urban design. It's not a simple solution. It's trying to provide a very rich environment for people. And finally, both of them relate to the human scale also, and making sure that we're designing from a human perspective, not just looking at a project from a distance, but really understanding how people want to work and operate and experience the city. And that brings us to one of the main themes, really, that within any master plan, whether it's for an industrial land plot or anywhere really, it isn't the buildings which we really try and focus on. It's creating an environment that is for people, creating spaces which are attractive and enabling people to populate the spaces and bringing more people in. So in that respect, it isn't about creating the architecture, although that's important, but it's providing the social infrastructure components. And the icons here just demonstrate many of the important components that we try and bring in to design outside of simply the building. So ensuring that there's good cycle networks within the project. Elements relating to what our colleagues have spoken about when it's a smart city components as well. So these are the aspects that we really try and focus on whenever we develop a master plan. So we've spoken briefly about some of the projects which we've been involved in globally, but now just to talk specifically about Moscow. I think trying to regenerate the industrial areas within the city, it's massively relevant for a city like Moscow. As of the late 2000s, 17% of Moscow was either unused industrial land or becoming or in decline. So there's huge opportunities within Moscow to transform these areas. And what we really try and set out whenever we work on a project is to bring some master planning principles to the design. The first principle is to create choice within the master plan, to understand that any development really benefits from having variety within there. So trying to accommodate a range of accommodation, making it not just a business class development, but trying to encourage variety within the project. And that obviously then allows a wider section of the community to then populate the project. Most importantly as well is creating a new public realm. Within the center of Moscow, there's incredible work that has happened in the regeneration of the public realm, new streets, new squares, new parks. But that also needs to happen within industrial areas as well, encouraging pedestrian networks, encouraging cycle routes. There's obviously a place for the car within all of this as well, but cars need to be managed within a master plan rather than them taking control and allowing parking to happen everywhere. So an integrated approach to how public walk and cycle through the master plan and the project. What we also try to do is to create a distinction within all of our projects. People need to know that there's a venue or a destination that is worth going to. So places need to have a name, they need to be distinct, they need to be something that people want to go and visit. And at the heart of all of that, there needs to be a mixed-use, vibrant heart to the community, trying to create focal points within a master plan that enable retail components to spill out and to create a social heart to a project. And similar to the work on the Olympics, all master plans need to be able to evolve and to be flexible. A master plan typically would take 20 or 30 years to be developed. And so over that time, the social and economic parameters certainly change. And so a master plan needs to be flexible in order to accommodate that. And just finally, just to touch upon a project that we're involved in at the moment. This is an industrial land plot that we're currently working on with a prominent Moscow developer. And it's not atypical for Moscow, really. It's a 7-hectare land plot in a heavily industrial area. What we have used is the principles that we spoke about to transform that into a vibrant new district within Moscow, and using all of the principles, trying to create a very high quality public realm that embraces pedestrian movement and vehicular movement, and creating an attractive human scale to the development as well. So this is the type of projects and the type of way that we see there being huge value in regenerating industrial areas of Moscow and bringing new life into them. And that's everything. Thank you. See ya.
Спасибо.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions? Yes, please. I have the following question, an interesting one. We heard some opinions that people who are totally strange to designing in the city, and you should not ask people about how you design that. And the second position, that you have to ask the opinion of everyone living in the city. So very often, people are judging only by their own experience. They cannot think scale of a city or scale of a country. How do you find this compromise, this balance between an opinion of one person and planning within a city? So what's the balance between individual interests and the city scale interests?
It's from our perspective, we really try to develop a project from the human experience, from the individual experience. Typically, we're working for developers, and developers have their own commercial requirements. But ultimately, ultimately, it's the people that matter more than anything else, and making sure that human experience within the project is at the forefront. Obviously, we have to work to all of the codes and the requirements. But I think the way that we really are successful in the way that we design is from the human level up, really, and making sure that that human individual experience is a high quality one.
Еще вопросы? Пожалуйста.
Кристина Иваненко, доцент кафедры психологии этой академии.
Мы в прошлом
Kristina Ivanenko, psychology senior lecturer from the academy. Last year we have done a lot of research for the Department of Urbanism, for our architects, in order to integrate psychological knowledge with architectural agendas that we have now. My question is, what is requested by the esteemed experts to psychologists? What would you like to learn from psychologists on the ergonomics of urbanism? How should construction look like so that people feel comfortable and protected? What research is needed to be done? There's a question to everybody. Yes, let's choose perhaps someone, just one speaker. Who can answer it? Do you hear me? Okay. You have seen my presentation, haven't you? It is just on your subject. So what's the basis? The state must act ethically and morally towards the human being. That's the base of psychology. Without this, there can be no contact with the customer, with the consumer. But studying the whole history of humanity, of the development of architecture, allows us to identify constants. And every architect is a psychologist, and a professional must be able, having spoken to the population, either convince the population or change his opinion. So neither me nor you are right. The truth is somewhere in the middle, but as I'm a professional, my objective is, while enhancing my knowledge, to convince the consumer, the person who will live there, that it will be good for him and find compromises. Then why there are practically no psychological disciplines in the architecture university? There are no psychologists. Well, it's a question to the Ministry of Education. Last question. My question is to Andrea. As you work on building industrial zones, do you study the ground? Because industrial zones may be very polluted, and the ground may be very much polluted, several meters deep, because besides stadiums and parks, of course, parks are also important. There where residential buildings are constructed, people will live there, and the ground may be dangerous for them.
Good point. Much industrial land is contaminated, and with that there's a significant protocol that we naturally have to follow in order to clean the earth, whether it's excavation or whether it's decontamination of the ground. But for all projects on industrial land plots, very early on in the design process, we would be understanding through surveys the quality of the ground and what work would need to happen to that in order to decontaminate it.
Ну, скажем так, что если
If, for example, a residential building has been constructed, a person who wants to buy a flat there or who will live there in any way must be able to see the documents which would confirm that the building stands on clean ground and that this building, the ground and the building is not dangerous for their health. There are such documents, aren't there? There are such documents which can confirm it.
Yes, there are. All buildings need to go through statutory approvals. In Russia, it's called the pre-X stage. And with that as well, there's a number of reports and exercises, design processes that we need to go through to demonstrate the decontamination of the ground.
Спасибо большое. Так, господа, мы слушаем.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we will listen to Evelina Eshmetova. I will speak during the coffee break, so you won't eat buns and you won't drink coffee. Let me start from the end. My absolutely personal opinion, you can argue with me or not, the solution of all those issues which we are discussing is on two planes, or there are two aspects to it. Relying on developers to build comfortable and convenient environment is not very probable, and the greed of developers is strictly regulated by the government in all countries from above. At the same time, our power, our authorities who do not think in long-term ways, they are often guided by principles other than mentioned by our esteemed co-speaker. And so we have just one way, that is to vote with the ruble. So the demand will give birth to supply. This is the only thing. It's the conclusion which we draw from everything that we have said. And it is unfortunately not state who buys the Koshlev design. I will try to argue with myself at the end of my presentation, but it is a subject on which you can argue for hours. The last thing that we have heard in Holland when we were there last time, the client on whom developers spent most of their time and effort is not the buyers in Europe, not the buyers. It's the local community and the municipality. Designs, before they are applied, may be discussed for 5, 8 or 10 years. And this is this is what I would like to speak about. It's a totally different approach to building, be it greenfield or brownfield projects. When we thought about our report, we made it in the middle of the year in the city of Plios. The Ivanova community tried to convince the new governor of the following. You know, in Ivanova, all industrial zones are facing the river, and so there is no embankment. And in order for an embankment to be constructed, they tried to convince the governor that it was necessary, and so they wanted him to show an example. They wanted to show examples in Russia when a municipality has become a big driver of constructing the new urban environment. We have found only two examples, Sochi and Vladivostok, and they are not very much suitable. And there are few examples like this in this country. It is mostly the developers and other commercial bodies who are the drivers of development. And we have made our report not from the point of view of urbanism, because I don't know much about it, or not from the point of view of an architect, because I'm not an architect, but from the point of view of an investor, a real estate consultant, and an ordinary person. So our position was like this. And when we see what we see, we say, in the market there are no such residents. There can be no jobs can be created in such a great number by such companies. So we cannot find money on the conditions that are dictated from above. So our job is mostly to create a informed and civilized approach either to redevelopment or to new development, and we have set up the School of Developer. And last year, and we went abroad to learn. We went to Sweden, to the Netherlands, to Germany, and this year we went to Denmark, Italy, and Japan. And we see what we see everywhere is a totally different approach. I'm not speaking about sustainable city, smart city, and other. In Sweden, they have already established the eco city. We cannot do anything like this. Let's look at the Maslow pyramid. Well, we are at our last meeting, we tried to look into the future for 30 or 40 years ahead. People from IBM said those who will make a secure, who will implement a secure design in Russia, will already create a smart city. All those principles are not something to which we can apply yet. So we go and see what we can use from other designs, from foreign designs, from the positions of commercial development. I'm not going to show you all the 350 slides. Here we see Hammarby Sjöstad in Sweden, which has been developed for 30 years. They also developed the Royal Seaport. This is something which has used the Hammarby Sjöstad the Royal Seaport is a more modern project. That's how it looks like now. I'm not going to speak too much about figures, about legal nuances, about housing cooperatives, which regulate a lot. But I would like to speak about what all those pictures are very nice, and when you are looking at them, you don't understand that they are made from one and the same point. You just turn around and you see such huge diversity. And why do you see it? Because municipalities consolidate land plots, and all this all those things like Hammarby, Sjöstad, and other places like that. Well, the municipality buys up the land, prepares it. Makes an analysis of the best possible use for several times, because over 5 to 7 years while they are doing this, the economic conditions change, there is a crisis. Municipality organizes a tender for developers. All this is beautiful, but just think about the figures. In Royal Seaport, 35,000 of square meters of huge housing, a small piece of several hundred hectares, and 35 to 40 developers take part in this bidding, and 3 to 5 are chosen, and 5 of them work in a very small part. Each of them builds a unique building or something, and they have very severe competition. And this is how diversity is born. It's not like our monotonous construction. And the places like Hammarby, several hundred technical experts meet and work on all issues in the online regime, in the online mode, sorry, and they work on the design. They establish they established the minimal size of a flat because developers are very greedy, and we have flats 16 or 17 square meter flats. In the Netherlands, they also gone through this, but they have stopped it because they found it's inconvenient. And they work to provide for everyone, housing for everyone, social housing, students' housing, etc., etc. And that's why well, we have been shown a design in the Netherlands, building up of a former airport. A large part of land was suddenly found between two cities, and they will be working on it for 10 years or more. And they said we could have two approaches: either to trade it in Europe, but so that one big developer could come and use it. And it's a very complicated scheme, and they don't like this approach. It was done in the 1980s, and they don't like it, and they believe that it would be better if the municipality works on it. They should set up a managing team and to play the role which our commercial developers play. And I would like to conclude by saying that during all those trips, we have not yet decided what should be better. Should we copy European or any other advanced experience? Because we are not sure that the market will buy it. According to most research papers, people usually buy things to which they were accustomed in their childhood. We are used to living in huge blocks of flats with multi-story blocks of flats, and people will perhaps not be glad to buy flats and 5-story blocks of flats. For this, we need another World War so that our people would go through Europe and see how people in Europe live. So, or whether we should provide people with what they really want, what they ask for, or shall we educate people? Shall we use professionals to educate people to accept what is more human? That's all for a while. And I would like to say about those trips that we should take into account the localization. What is good for Germans might not be good for Russians. There where we are with the Choban architects is the finished embankment after reconstruction. They voted their local democratic societies. They say we have too much democracy, but we like it. We have too much democracy, but we like it. That's their way of life. So they wanted to the place to be identified where the wall was or where the port was. There are no benches. We didn't like many things in Germany and all the developers who were with us, but there are a lot of things which we could learn from other points of view. But localization must be very important. Now I give the floor to the questions. Questions, please. Once again, I have grabbed the microphone. Evelina, good afternoon. Thank you very much. It is a very, very interesting approach. And as regards people who are so short-sighted, you are quite right. In Moscow municipalities, there is one function is the amelioration of the territory. All deputies come for 5 years. We wanted to have a strategy for 5 years because of our small budgets. We need to work within a budget multiplied by five periods. Tell me, please, I understand that here, well, for developers it's huge areas, huge money. So is your organization or your block or your association ready to prepare for Moscow's municipalities programs of renovation of public spaces? We cannot build anything, we cannot change anything because we have the general plan, but we can change the existing urban environment into something new, because the scale of developers are things on figures on paper, and 55,000 people living in a small area is a different thing. Well, we are ready, and if we cannot do anything, we can tell you who can. And this idea of amelioration of spaces, well, is something funny. It is started. Whenever you come to any region and start talking about the 10 principles of amelioration of residential buildings, which we copied from Europe, and people take photos with great relish, as if it has not been said to them for the latest 4 years. When we say, for example, that benches should not be put on the ground floor windows and a little bit further, well, nonetheless, we are ready to repeat it. Well, I would like to continue the question by my colleague. We have specific time limits, deadlines for the renovation program, and residents are interested in it. People who are not professionals, but I cannot speak for everybody. I can speak only for myself. I cannot speak for the country, for Moscow. But there are very few people who understand such things. So the issue of teaching people is different. The issue of teaching municipal deputies is another thing. Is your association ready, together with the community of professional companies working in Moscow, to come to specific municipal deputies and, together with the district population, look at the renovation programs which the city offers? No matter whether this is the general plan or a specific company, and to build this interaction when for people the opinion of your company, of the professional community, will also matter, not just their own assessment. How possible is this? Well, if this helps you, we will be able to. We have defended our own building. Now we have our last presentation, to which we have been looking forward. So please, good evening, everybody, those who have survived and those who has not fallen asleep yet, and who is still with us. I am glad to welcome you. Thank you, Elena, for the organization of such a wonderful forum, and for our wonderful speakers, the colleagues, to whom I have listened with delight. Within the framework of my presentation, I would like to show, rather to continue what my colleagues have said, to show the consumer's point of view. What happens after a renovation program implementation with non-commercial real estate and office real estate? Who uses that? How much is this in demand? How much it will be in demand tomorrow? There are a lot of interesting projects that have been implemented or are still being implemented on the place of former territories of industrial zones, and very often this is a very comfortable environment. I I am from the LM company, which implements residential housing and commercial projects, and I also work for the. I'm also on the commission, which cooperates with the World Bank in this field, and I often cooperate with similar commissions in Asia, America, Oceania, etc. And I often communicate with developers, with investors, etc. And this spirit of old times, high quality renovation projects are very much in demand. I will mention for example, such projects as Электролучин, Большая Пироговская, as the Красная Роза project, and a number of other projects in Moscow, which are very much in demand. First of all, among corporate users and of the Z generation who like the loft style, high ceilings, large open spaces, good insulation. And the number of such examples is great. It is not always mainly a commercial issue. For developers who implement such projects is often their aim in their lives. And so they want not just have a high rentability. They also want to be remembered as a wonderful company which has implemented such a wonderful project in the city of Moscow. Some figures. Moscow is a small city, despite the fact that we, over the latest 10 years, the floor space of offices has grown 2.5 times. We are still lagging behind London and Paris and other world capitals. And 10 years ago, there was a shortage of real estate, residential, office, or warehousing. Now we have enough of it. We have about 20% of vacant office floor space in Moscow, which allows us as consumers to vote with our feet. Of course, such renovation and reconstruction projects are mostly in demand in the center, which is easily accessible by traffic and where there are embankments and parks. And on average, the coefficient of vacant floor space is far lower than in the rest of Moscow. Well, Moscow city is a different thing. One of the trends is, well, everybody begins to value their time more and more. Time is priceless. And we want to live in large spaces where there is all necessary infrastructure. So from pinpoint building, we need big spaces where within 5 minutes we can walk to anything that we need, find a cafe, a restaurant, a cinema, a shop. And we continue to vote for this. So such large areas as Moscow City and a number of others will be very much in demand, and they will appear in Moscow in future. From the point of view of putting into exploitation of new floor space, despite the fact that the floor space has grown 2.5 times over the latest 2 years, the rate of growth has been rather very low. At the end of 2014, the demand has gone down. And development is a long cycle. It is not 1 year or 2 years. It is often not even 3 years. What we see now is slowing down. And the latest projects that were planned in the 6th, 8th, or 10th or 11th years are being finished. And nothing is being planned now in commercial real estate. So in this year there will be very little new floor space will be introduced and built, and next year it will be even less. Why so? Because there is migration into quality. We see a large cross section, and we have a great a great mass of data over the latest years, which show that people need commercially effective projects. And we can say with assurance that companies and corporations vote for high-quality projects. Within the A class, in the number of the amount of vacant floor space is going down, and it is in the minus C class that the amount of vacant floor space grows. And finally, we will have a big ghetto in Moscow. We will see abandoned territories where developers won't be able to develop, and so a new player appears on the horizon. The banks. We have discussed already the Torzhok project, and there are lots of over 100,000 meters. There are lots of such unfinished or half-finished projects, and they are very much like former industrial zones, which are first of all insecure, and second, there's practically no face control. And people lease, the owners lease offices or flats to anyone who is ready to pay.
That's a very difficult moment, and we'll have to pay dear for that. So this question requires attention from us. And the central bank, which rehabilitates the banks, they actually have to be very attentive about that. Well, really many banks which lost their licenses, they sponsored certain development projects. You have to deal with that, yes? About 38 projects in terms of renovation and gentrification take place on the former industrial zones, and I understand that the total area of released territories, these might be some historical buildings where the buildings constructed early in the 20th century, and now they will have to be renewed, redeveloped, because we as investors or people don't want to be there because they have no HVAC, they have no heating, they have no parking lots. One of the interesting projects in terms of the renovation or gentrification is the one to replace debilitated port and former railway implemented by Hudson Yards. Territory of about 10 hectares. Skyscrapers are going to be built there because Manhattan has a lot of high-rises, skyscrapers, but actually the authors of the project decided to use this territory as a magnet to attract the residents of Manhattan and tourists too. This project is being implemented along with actually a company similar to Russian railways. They covered the railways with a platform which would prevent any noise and any vibration, and they're building this project with a total square of more than 550,000 square meters. I promised you some projects in terms of redevelopment and gentrification and renovation, and you see that the statistics actually is very much below the world average. And some projects have a single vacancy rate and are overly successful. That's an example of the companies which use such buildings for the offices. Usually this would be the Z generation companies, companies which are ready to retain their employees, to attract the best talents and create unique environment for the development of new directions. And naturally, co-working is of special importance. We follow the tendencies which we observed 2-3 years ago. But the world market, the world tendencies, they ruin the standard stereotypes. So there are core working temporary shops which emerge along with some soft storage. These are us who are opting for these projects as developers who own this and that land plot or this and that house, residential house. How are we going to develop it? Certainly, redevelopment and renovation bears a lot of risks, but at the same time, it offers a lot of opportunities to create unique environment for the residents of that district and the residents of adjacent or neighboring districts. And I will be glad if we have more such successful projects, especially if they are implemented by professional teams of general contractors, constructors, consultants, who, acting as one, would build such projects which are in very much demand and very popular. Any questions to Andrew? Dmitry, let us give him 1 minute. He's dying to ask a question. Ladies and gentlemen, historically, I used to work with a lot of IT engineers, Samsung and Google, and I've never seen a presentation against white background with such small fonts. Look at the sky. So, yellow stars and blue skies. Yellow against blue, that's very good, and we cannot watch white screen and black fonts. This is just very impolite for everyone. Well, really, guys, the discussion was very interesting, and I'm very much pleased that it took place. And as a representative of a municipal authority, I see that from my own perspective. I would like to dwell on the topic that people do not participate in the planning for the renovation and redevelopment. Very important is to say that prior to developing a master plan and the land use rules, we mandatory, in compliance with the effective legislation, have to arrange for public hearings, because before that or without that, no land use rules could be developed. So it means that all the residents are engaged in the planning through these public hearings. In Khimki, we got more than 2,000 propositions, from the local residents. And 1,400 out of 2,000 were taken into consideration. So people said, we do not want railway here. Well, actually, railway cannot be eliminated. Next step is that our deputies, our MPs, have to approve of the land use rules, and the MPs are elected by the residents, by the citizens. Again, so they indirectly participate in this planning process. First, the residents determine the outlook of the city, then this outlook has been confirmed by the MPs, members of parliament. Secondly, as for the municipality is concerned, I know that our European colleagues, mayors just like me, but acting in different other cities, they strive at the same objective to improve the living standards, to improve the quality of living. And do you know that in Khimki, we have a project office. We have CRM. We are using Scrum, laser-based technologies, and we have more than 500 projects for the year 2018. In order to develop the territory, you may use this one-stop shop approach and say, for instance, I want to build a commercial center, and you'll be supported at all the levels of authority. So we have, as Russian officials, a lot of experience. For instance, I worked in Asia for 6 years in close contact with Hong Kong and Beijing authorities, and I was in Washington in 2013. I asked the same questions to the vice mayor responsible for land use in Washington, for instance. Actually, how much time it takes to execute the license for a construction, and they would say it takes about 3 to 4 years, and I would say I thought it is 6 months only, and actually they would say no, this is too sophisticated. We have 11,000 hectares of land, and if we deduct forests, if we deduct water body, actually this is only 1,000 hectares left to manage. And ask this question to our colleagues from Denmark, and they would respond. And back in my district, we are meticulously selecting the contractors who is going to build what. We have more than 2,000 enterprises located on that territory. The airport and adjacent shopping malls are also there. And we have no land plots, free land plots. You cannot just build a skyscraper in the middle of nowhere. And together with the civic chamber, together with the people, actually, we analyze the master plan. And for instance, we now are implementing a project for schools and kindergartens, which is called Palm. When children are using palm in order to enter the school, and they use a palm of their hands for their identification. In Russia, municipalities are not some obsolete villages, and sometimes we're even ahead of some European countries, and I'm ready to show that to you in practice. I can speak only about Moscow region and about my district. So I invite you to arrive to us. I will show you everything, how the Moscow region works and lives. Thank you so much. One question only. We have run out of time, actually. My name is Natalia Shavshukova. I live nearby. I live next to Khimki, the village of Golikova. And we see a lot of conflicts related to city building and development, and it takes place at the level of the master plan and city building rules. I suggest that we resume our consultations in October. I'd like to get some confirmation from you that really this will take place. We have to address these issues, these questions together. Not just use a bulldozer in order to demolish buildings and use workers in order to cut 100-year-old trees, but this is what should be discussed along with the residents, those who are already house owners. Come to us. Come to us. We'll sit at the round table, not to waste other people's time. So the land plot, actually, which you are speaking about, is owned by a private investor. And the private investor has a license to build a residential house there. And the residents say, actually, we don't want a building to be constructed there, and the investor bears a lot of costs. So we cannot tell the investor, don't build there. This is his private property and he has a license. Let us discuss it. We have created a working group, so let us take into consideration people's opinion. Certainly not. Certainly not, please. Can you give me some statistics? A few words about. I actually don't want our discussion to end with such negative sentiments. Well, private questions, please leave for private conversations, or actually, we cannot afford, we cannot allow for such a town. And moreover, Dmitry told us what Khimki is about, and Khimki is not alone. Moscow region boasts 67 municipalities. So let us have a look at the dynamics, how the municipal districts are now transforming into the city municipalities. So this is a rare example. This saves up our costs, and we have some pedestrian accessibility. Khimki was one of the first to get an improved status in the middle of the 21st century. Now, 1/3 of the regions of Russia follow this example. Moscow, every year, has about 2.5 million what we call pendulum migrant workers or commuters who arrive to Moscow to work, and they live in the neighboring regions and they pay their taxes there, although they work in Moscow. That's a problem. We have to distribute the budget, federal budget, more evenly. And can you please convey that to the organizers of this forum? Last year, there were 4 or 5 sections dedicated to the development of cities and municipalities. And this time, this section is the only one. Actually, this is totally a shame. Actually, we're somewhere in between. There are grassroots people and there are authorities. And we have to delegate certain authorities, certain power to people in between. We have to pay more attention to the municipalities. And in that case, we won't have some marginal projects. We won't have any such problems, but really there will be a connection between people and the authorities. Okay, I will convey that to the organizers, even if I'm fired. Thank you so much. Dear friends, I do think that this section was very nice. I liked it very much because it was very lively, it was contradictory, and we see the clash of certain opinions, and that's good, that's normal. I would like to thank, first of all the speakers. I would like to thank Dmitry, Alexander, Andy, Irina, Andrew, and Martin, who actually was stolen from us to grant an interview. I would like to thank the organizers of this section. He's deputy head of the department of one of the core ministries. I will not tell you what ministry he represents. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for questions. We will have to make a press release following the results of this discussion panel. I kindly ask you to send at my email address everything you want to see there in this press release. So it doesn't mean that it will be included into the press release, but we'll try to take your opinion into consideration, just like municipality reconciles all the interests. Thank you so much.